Well, pretty soon we're going to have a starting lineup for your Pitt Panthers in 2023. We'll see a two deep, a depth chart, and we'll find out who's going to actually take the field first when they open up against Wofford. Chances are there's going to be a lot of familiar names on there, people that might even be your neighbor. We're going to talk about something that we've been noticing about the potential starting lineup for Pitt that I think local Western Pennsylvania is going to enjoy on today's edition of the Morning Pitt here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. All right, welcome to Monday. Welcome to the Morning Pitt. Welcome to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com. Glad to hang out with you again this morning to get another week started. It's the fourth week of training camp. It's the final week of training camp. I forget if they're off today or not. They had a scrimmage on Saturday. There's no media open windows, so if they're practicing today or yesterday, it wasn't open to us. But we know they have practices Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then it's a kickoff luncheon on Friday. And then next week, baby, it's game week. It's the real thing. Pat Narduzzi's press conference on Monday. The game notes coming out. The first official depth chart will be out, and we'll be all leading up to Saturday, September 2nd, when Pitt hosts Wofford at Acrisure Stadium for the 2023 season opener. So there's a lot to look forward to for that. And if you want to get ready for that game, you want to get ready for the season, you want to get ready for everything coming at the end of training camp, the place to do it is right there. Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. And if you want to look your best for the season opener and for all the games this season, that right there, Home Field Apparel is the place to do it. HomeFieldApparel.com. The best Pitt gear you're going to find, some great classic vintage logos from Pitt and about 150 other schools across the country. Anybody you're looking for, they've got great stuff, and they're pretty much undefeated. It's pretty much 100% across the board. All of their logos and their marks look awesome. It's just a classic look, instantly recognizable with the schools that they represent. And it's on super soft t-shirts, really comfortable t-shirts that hold their shape. There's some of the best college gear you're going to find, and it's right there at Home Field Apparel. And remember, if you go to homefieldapparel.com, use the promo code. It'll pop up throughout the video here. The promo code LAIR23, LAIR23. Use that promo code, and you'll get 15% off your first order at homefieldapparel.com. How about that deal? 15% off some of the best college sports gear that you're going to find. Homefieldapparel.com. Go check it out now. You will not be disappointed. Now, I gave that tease at the beginning of the video about, you might be a neighbor that's playing on the field for Pitt this year. But, you already see the headline of the video, so you know what we're talking about. It's the WPIAL resurgence, let's call it, at Pitt. The WPIAL resurgence, there's a real possibility this year that you could see a starting lineup with Phil Dracovic at quarterback, Jake Cradle at center, Blake Zabovic at guard, probably right guard, I'm guessing, Dayon Hayes at defensive end, Devin Danielson at defensive tackle, David Green at defensive tackle, and MJ Devonshire at cornerback. 7 starters, realistic. I would, to the point where I would be surprised if any of those 7 guys were not starting. And then an outside chance of Stephon Hall or Donovan McMillan being in the rotation or even a starting job at safety. Sean Fitzsimmons working into the rotation at defensive tackle. Nikai Johnson potentially being in the starting lineup at defensive end. Derek Davis Jr. from Gateway playing at running back. Braylon Lovelace and Cruz Brookins, 2 freshmen from the WPIAL who are making an impression and impact at linebacker and defensive back respectively. So, as many as 14 guys could be legitimate contributors. I think you could even see 1 or 2 of them climb into the starting lineup. I've got this personal kind of hope that I think it would be awesome to see an all Western Pennsylvania defensive line. From one end to the other, Dayon Hayes, Devin Danielson, David Green, Nikai Johnson. And I think it's a realistic possibility. Nate Temple seems to be ahead at that other starting defensive end job opposite Dayon Hayes. But Nikai Johnson is having a good camp, and I think realistically could play himself into that job. But at least 7 starters on this team will be from Western Pennsylvania this year. And that's remarkable because it seems to me like we haven't seen that a whole lot, in recent years. And I went back, and if you go back to the heyday of Dave Wanstead and immediately after, they pretty regularly had 9, 10, 11 guys from Western PA starting on those teams. The 2009 team, that's as far back as I went. I didn't go to 2008, but I'm sure the numbers would look similar to this. But 2009, they had 9 starters on that team from Western Pennsylvania. On offense, they had Jonathan Baldwin and Jason Pinkston and John Malecki and Lucas Nix and Bill Stahl and Doran Dickerson. And on defense, they had Mick Williams, Adam Gunn, and Dom DeCicco. So 9 guys. And it was the same thing in 2010. Some different players. Mike Shanahan and Chris Jacobson were in the mix there. Tino Sunseri, of course. Miles Carrigan. Brandon Lindsay moved into the starting lineup that year. But they still had 9 guys. 2011, sort of the same thing. Largely the same faces, but a few new guys showed up. Juan Price became a starter that year. Cam Sadler started a bunch of games. Ryan Turnley stepped in as the starting center in 2011 under Todd Graham. Todd Thomas became a fixture in the starting lineup at linebacker that year. So they had 9 guys. In 2012, there was actually 10 starters from Western PA. Most of the guys we mentioned, plus J.P. Holtz, Shane Hale was the starter. Aaron Donald actually started late in the season that year. Tyrone Ezell, Lafayette Pitts was the starter on that team. In 2012, Paul Christ's first year, they had 10 starters in 2013 from Western PA. Tyler Boyd moved into the starting lineup. Adam Bizdavati and Ryan Schleeper. Jamar Parrish and Scott Orndorff kind of split the starts at their position, that sort of tight end H-back spot. So I'm going to count that as one. Aaron Donald, Tyrone Ezell, we mentioned Thomas, Price, Pitts. I mean, Donald, Ezell, Todd Thomas, Lafayette Pitts, and Juan Price were like multi-year starters together, where you had, 5 of the 11 starters on defense, all from Western Pennsylvania. And then 2014, same thing, 10 guys. Kanan Mosley-Smith moved in to the starting lineup instead of Aaron Donald because Donald was gone. Dorian Johnson moved into the starting lineup. Manessa Garner got starts that year as a Western PA guy who came back as a transfer. 2015, the number actually went up. Pat Narduzzi's first year, he had 11 starters. And when I'm talking about starters, guys who started a decent amount of games. There was one, you fast forward 2021, John Patrician started 6 games. Well, I'm not calling him. They played 14 games that year. If you started less than half the games and it wasn't due to an injury or something, I'm not going to count you. So we wouldn't count Patrician that year. But we're talking about guys who started the majority of the season, were regular starters, ideally started every game, and in most cases started most of them. And in 2015, they had 11. Dontez Ford was a starter that year. Boyd and Biznavati and Johnson and Holtz. Rory Blair was a starter that year. Kanan Mosley-Smith, Juan Price, Mike Caprera was a starter. Jordan Whitehead stepped in as a true freshman starter. Terrence Webb was a starter coming from Clareton. In 2016, they had 11 starters again. Those first 2 years of Narduzzi, he had 11 starters from Western PA each year. In 2011, you see a lot of the same names. Orndorff, Biznavati, Alex Bookser stepped into the starting lineup. Rory Blair, Tyreek Jarrett stepped into the starting lineup. Juan Price, Mike Caprera, Sean Idowu made his debut as a starter in 2016. Reggie Mitchell, who transferred back from Wisconsin. I mentioned him in the 2014 starting lineup. He was back in the starting lineup in 2016 after Jordan Whitehead got hurt, but Whitehead was starting there as well. He got hurt in that Clemson game. And Dane Jackson became a starter. They had some real depth issues at cornerback that year, and so guys like Dane Jackson ended up in the starting lineup. I mean, you're talking about 10 or 11 starters that year. But then the numbers start to tail off a little bit. You get into 2017, Elijah Zeiss and Sean Idowu were starters at linebacker that year. Damar Hamlin was a starter with Jordan Whitehead, the 2 safeties, and Dane Jackson was a starter as well. So you had 6 guys that year. Oh, including Ben DiNucci. And we're going to count DiNucci here. I mean, should we count DiNucci here? He didn't start to open the season. He didn't start a majority of the games. He started 4 or 5. I forget what the exact number was. But we'll count him just to get and we have to count him just to get the number up to 6. Otherwise, there were no offensive starters from Western PA on that 2017 team. 2018, the number was 6 again. Alex Bookser was in the starting lineup in 16. And then Zeiss, Idowu, Dennis Briggs, Damar Hamlin, Dane Jackson. So, I mean, 6 starters out of 22 is not a whole lot, but it actually went down after that. In 2019, only 4 guys, Gabe Hoy, Paris Ford, Damar Hamlin, and Dane Jackson. I mean, thankfully they got Damar Hamlin and Dane Jackson. They got multiple years out of those guys. Jackson could go in as a starter on basically 4 different seasons. 2016, 17, 18, and 19. Damar Hamlin was a starter for 3 of those seasons, 17, 18, 19, and 20, so he has 4 years that he can contribute. I mean, they've had a regular flow of Western PA starters, but a lot of it is sort of the same guys year after year. It's, just to get to those numbers. 2020, they only had 5. Jake Cradle, Gabe Hoy, David Green, Devin Danielson, and DeMar Hamlin. 2021, they only had 3. I mean, not counting Patrician. Jake Cradle, Gabe Hoy. Actually counting Patrician. They only had 3. Cradle, Hoy, and Patrician were the only starters on that 2021 ACC championship team. And I mean, like Blake Zabovic got some starts in there as well. But I mean, regular, almost end-to-end or majority of the starts guys, I mean, it was Cradle and Hoy. And really, I think Cradle got hurt that year, right? And Hoy or Zabovic replaced him anyway. So it was, even if you want to count both of those guys, they kind of count for the same spot as far as starters. So you're down to only 3. And then last year they had 4. Cradle and Zabovic, Devin Danielson, and MJ Devonshire. David Green kind of started some games in there. But so those numbers have dipped. After being really high in those first few years of Narduzzi, of 15 and 16, having 11 starters each year, the numbers dipped pretty considerably, down to 3 and 4 and 5. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. I mean, you're talking about the seasons of 2021, 2022. When you go back and look at the recruiting from 2016, not 16 as much as 17 and 18, Pitt didn't do all that well in Western PA in 2017 and 18. I mean, 17 was the year where they got rather ceremonially crushed in Western PA. They got Paris Ford, and they got Gabe Hoy, and they might have had one other, I can't recall. I think Hoy might have been it. But they missed on, it was a, at the time, it looked like a very strong year for Western PA in recruiting. With the likes of Lamont Wade and CJ Thorpe and Donovan Jeter and Josh Lugg and David Adams and Kurt Heinisch and all those guys. And they all got away. A bunch went to Notre Dame. Michigan got Jeter. Penn State obviously got their guys. And it was a rough year. And so Pitt got kind of not entirely shut out, but Pitt went pretty cold in the WPIAL and Western Pennsylvania at large for a couple of years there. And I think that was reflected by what you saw in the starting lineups in 2020, 21, and 22. Now, as we enter 2023, the situation seems to be turning a little bit. But it's not necessarily turning because Pitt has been cleaning up in the WPIAL. They did really well 2020-21 with defensive linemen, which is part of the reason why, I think, well, it's somewhat part of the reason why they're, they've got a chance for an all WPIAL D-line this year. But the reality is, those two classes of potential starters on the defensive line from the 20 and 21 classes, you're talking about Deion Hayes and Nikai Johnson. Elliott Donald hasn't made it there yet, and Dorian Ford switched to offense. So over the course of those 2 years, they got basically every good defensive lineman in Western PA, all the priority guys, Deion Hayes, Elliott Donald, Nikai Johnson, and Dorian Ford. But right now, Hayes is the only one who's really penciled in or even locked in as a starter this year, and Johnson is the other one who would see real playing time. Otherwise, Elliott Donald is kind of probably on that third tier of defensive tackles right now, and he might be on this. No, he's probably on the third tier as we kind of look at it. And like I say, Ford moved to offensive line, and so you're not going to see those guys playing together. But there was a little bit of a resurgence in Pitt's WPIAL recruiting over the last couple years. But we also know the other angle to why Pitt will have so many WPIAL kids and Western PA kids contributing this year. It's a transfer portal. I mean, when I name those 7 starters, 2 of the 7, Phil Dracovic and MJ Devonshire, are here because they transferred. Dracovic, obviously, his path from Notre Dame to Boston College and back to Pitt. Devonshire spent a couple years at Kentucky and then came back to Pitt. And then the other guys that we talk about as potential contributors, when we talk about a Derek Davis Jr., we talk about Donovan McMillan, we're talking about guys who transfer. Now the bulk of these guys, we're talking about 14 potential Western PA contributors this year, and only 4 of the 14 are transfers. Guys who transferred home after going elsewhere out of high school. So the other 10 are still recruiting wins. Jake Cradle and Blake Zabovic and Danielson and Green, and Deion Hayes, Stephon Hall and Sean Fitzsimmons and Nikai Johnson and Braylon Lovelace and Cruz Brookins. They're all guys who chose to come here straight out of high school and seem to be excelling and doing well and making their way toward the field. But it is notable that this Western PA movement this year, the Western PA hype train, we'll have an episode of the Morning Pit this week where we break down the various hype trains surrounding Pitt football right now. But the Western PA hype train is driven at least in part by transfers, which take them however you can get them. It'll be interesting to see if they go through this season and Phil Dracovic has a good year, MJ Devonshire has another good year and gets drafted. If McMillan and Davis start, showing up, like have good seasons, and I think those guys are a little bit further down the depth chart than Dracovic and Devonshire. But it'll be interesting to see what kind of impact those guys have if they're able to have success after going away and then coming home. If that weighs at all on young players, recruits that are up and coming in Western PA, that maybe it's not as good an idea to go away. Maybe going away is not as appealing as you once thought it was. My guess is it won't be big. It won't weigh too large, but there might be one guy here or there who sees it and makes their decision. Kind of like when you go back to the 2013 class with Tyler Boyd and Robert Foster, and we know where each of those guys went, and we know where their paths led. Where Boyd came to Pitt and had a great career and got into the NFL as a second round draft pick, and Foster went to Alabama and never really played all that much, never really contributed all that much, and ended up in the NFL. But his career did not take the path that was expected for him out of high school, and it certainly didn't take the path that Tyler Boyd's career took. And you fast forward to 2 years later when Jordan Whitehead is coming out of Central Valley and he chooses Pitt, and he specifically says that part of the reason he chose Pitt is he looked at Boyd and Foster and wanted to follow the path that Boyd was on, not the path that Foster was on. Not as a means of disrespect to Foster, but he saw what could be done by staying home and getting an opportunity and playing early, and he's turned it into a successful and productive, probably lucrative NFL career. So I think it's possible that as we move down the line, if these guys have success when they come back home, it's going to it can have some impact on guys, young kids who are coming up who might be leaning away. At the same time, I think some of these guys, Dayon Hayes, Braylon Lovelace, Cruz Brookins, if these guys can go out and play well and really excel in front of their hometown crowd, I think that can have an impact as well. Now, we all know about the reasons why Western PA doesn't produce as much talent as it once did. There's still good players, but maybe not quite as many of them. Quality is still high, but quantity has taken a bit of a dip. And so you're never going to build a whole team out of Western PA players. And I'd be surprised if they get back to the numbers of even 6-7 years ago when they had 11 starters from Western PA. But there's always good talent here, and it's always good talent you want to get. And I think it definitely doesn't hurt when you have Western PA players starting for you, particularly if you can go out and have a successful season. 2021 was great. I think 2021 was great for the program. It helped Pitt a lot, and definitely put Pitt in great position moving forward. And it was a great sign of progress for the program and all of that. They only had 3 WPIAL kids and Western PA kids in the starting lineup, and that's one of those 3 only started 6 games. So I think doing that, having that kind of season with even more, with local players even more prominently featured, it's only going to help as you try and recruit locally. So we'll see, obviously if they could go out and have 7 starters and 14 total contributors from Western PA and have those guys play big roles on this team this year and go out and win 9-10 games, compete in the ACC and all of that, you would think it'll help you with some pretty good recruiting classes coming up in 25, 26, and 27. Western PA already looks pretty sharp in those upcoming recruiting classes. So it's only going to help. It's definitely not going to hurt. So we'll see. I think that's interesting, though, as we talk about the different hype trains, and we'll talk about hype trains this week. This little WPIAL movement is a pretty notable one. I really think it is. All right, listen, I'll tell you what else is notable. It's the t-shirts and gear at Home Field. HomeFieldApparel.com. Go check it out right now to find the best Pitt gear you're going to see. Some of the best logos, marks. Look at that picture right there. I mean, those are both very, very sweet shirts, and they've got even more where that comes from. They're super comfortable. They hold their shape. They're high-quality shirts, and they look great. You can get 15% off your first order with the promo code LAIR23. So go check it out now at homefieldapparel.com, promo code LAIR23. Then head over to Panther-Lair.com to keep up on all the Pitt sports news, and like this video and subscribe right here to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Thanks so much for tuning in today. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you had a great weekend. It's the final week of camp, so we're going to have a lot to talk about. Don't go anywhere. Make sure you are stay tuned right here at Panther-Lair at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We'll be back with you tomorrow morning for another Morning Pitt right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.